Ascension of Arcturus, Part 1. December 22, 2015. 2016, which is knocking at the door of our consciousness, feels very different than any year that I can remember. Therefore, I wanted to usher in 2016 with the Ascension of Arcturus. Blessings to you all in the myriad ways that you celebrate our entry into the important year of 2016, Mitre speaks. As the file of the Oversoul opened, it pulled me into a scene from before all counting of time. At first, I could hear only words I did not understand, and feel a sense of panic. Eventually, I regained my vision enough to see a scene before me that struck my heart as it reminded me of my homeworld in the Pleiades. Beings who looked vaguely humanoid were rushing around in a state of near panic. Something was happening to their planet that they could not understand. My first thought was, how could these frightened beings be Arcturians? An instant response, seemingly from the Oversoul, was, they are no longer Arcturians. There are some among them who will remember to return to being Arcturian. The Oversoul then told me how formless beings had come from a distant universe to visit the young Milky Way galaxy. These beings had never known form, nor had they ever lived on a planet. The name of these beings is impossible to translate into any sequential language, such as the one I am using to share my story. Therefore, I will call them pre-Arcturians. These pre-Arcturians decided to have the experience of being a planet, since being an individual was far below their conception. For millions of cycles, they attached their great consciousness to the orb and the atmosphere of a planet. Eventually, they desired the experience of having forms that could move around on the planet. They decided that in this manner they could have the different perspective of being on the planet, rather than being the planet. For countless cycles of the planet, some of them lived within their somewhat humanoid forms. Throughout the course of these cycles, the oneness held the form of the planet and its atmosphere, so that it could be protected and maintained. Eventually, the planet lowered in frequency enough to have a vague relationship with time. With the new development of time, which was a unique experience for the Arcturians, things began to happen that were not initiated by the Arcturians, who were the planetary holders of form. Having less than infinite creative control of all reality was also a new adventure, and they surrendered to this next experience, never thinking that they could become lost in their own quest. They had never known time, so they had no idea how it could create aging and decay. At first, they thought that the aging and decay were merely changes. Hence, they embraced it. Too late, after many thousands of cycles of the turn of their planet, they realized that the humanoid encasements began to decay. Having never worn a form, this was quite a surprise to them. To their even greater surprise, they realized that as they began to decay, they also began to forget. Some of them forgot that the planet was alive with their own Arcturian family. Some of them forgot about their true, formless state, and some of them forgot that they were all one being wearing somewhat separate forms. Unique thoughts began to enter their consciousness, such as separation, time, and even age. At first, these previously unknown concepts were exciting. This manner of thought was so different from anything they had ever known. The truth is that they had become somewhat bored in their infinite, formless state of all-knowing and all-being. In fact, some of them became so excited by this adventure that they scorned their innate beingness, and judged those who remained in their pure, formless state. Judgment was an entirely unique concept, as well as a very dangerous idea. Before they knew it, they began to divide into those who judged, and those who did not judge. Those who did not judge remained in the higher frequencies of their new reality. On the other hand, those who judged began to shift their attention away from the unconditional love and unity with all Arcturians, and embraced a growing perception of separation from those who chose not to judge. Judgment became an important tool for them, as it pulled them into a denser reality than they had ever recognized. This group began to feel that they were better than the others. After all, they were the brave ones. They were the ones who could enter into a novel version of reality, which was unknown in their universe. They never saw the consequences of their judgment coming. In fact, the notion of consequences was unknown to them. They had not identified that a thought could be separate from the whole. Hence, when some of them began to branch out from the concept of judgment into the concept of comparison, they were unprepared for the separation that occurred. The separation first began with a differential between those who wore a form and those who remained in the planetary atmosphere as pure beings of light. Then the separation expanded to divide into those who were the holders of the planetary form and those who were the holders of humanoid form. The problems escalated greatly when the holders of humanoid form began to separate from each other. At first, the energy patterns that connected all the humanoids were visible. However, over the cycles of the spinning planet, the perception of the connecting energy field began to lessen. Consequently, the separation between those in humanoid form increased, as did the judgment. The humanoid Arcturians did not realize that their resonance was steadily dropping, as it occurred very gradually. Furthermore, they had time to unconsciously adapt to these versions of their new reality. The Arcturians who remained in the atmosphere and the holders of planetary form never left their unity consciousness. Therefore, they remained at a high frequency of resonance and were free of time, separation, and the judgment that had created the lower frequency concepts and experiences. These Arcturians tried to warn those who had chosen forms, but the humanoids were so enjoying their new adventure that they would not listen. In fact, the humanoids accused their formless family of being afraid to try a new kind of reality. Afraid? The formless Arcturians could not even understand that concept. Once fear was invited into the picture, the formless Arcturians could no longer unite with their family in humanoid form. Something blocked them from full unity. Was this something, the concept of being afraid? Unable to intervene, the formless Arcturians gradually discovered that, indeed, fear was the barrier to their reunification with their family in form. From their higher resonance they could not feel fear, but when they tried to bond with the formed ones, they could feel the fear within the humanoids. Why were the humanoids afraid? They pondered. They finally realized that the fear was an end result of what had begun as judgment. The formless Arcturians were learning a great deal from their humanoid family, but were unable to assist them. Helplessly, they watched as the formed ones became more and more separate. Finally, the humanoids became individuals who were totally separated from their formless family, separated from their planet and separated from each other. The growing fear made the situation go from what was once positive into something that had become very negative. Fortunately, some of the individuals found a new kind of courage, the courage to remember. As these brave humanoids allowed themselves to remember their roots, they remembered their Arcturian family who had never taken humanoid form. Finally, the formless Arcturians could communicate with their family members who had become lost in their own judgment. To be continued. Channeled by Suzanne Lee. SuzanneLeePhD.blogspot.com